If you saw my earlier videos, I've done a little book review on All Quiet on the Western Front. With the war raging all around, I've found the book very engaging and very poignant. And it's written the greatest war novel of all times, written by Erich Maria Remarque, who wrote it in German, and it was translated by A. It has been translated by A.W. Wien and published by Ballantine Books, New York. Just to give an insight into the poignant story, or which is there for any soldier who joins the army. All the 20 something who think that life is a straight line, sort of, and are rudely shaken off. That's why I feel like reading this out, something from chapter 2. It says, "It is strange to think that at home in the drawer of my writing table there lies the beginning of a play called Saul and a bundle of poems. Many an evening I have worked toward them. We all did something of that kind, but that has become so unreal to me I cannot comprehend it any more. Our early life is cut off from the moment we came here, and that without our lifting a hand. We often try to look back on it and to find an explanation, but never quite succeed. For us young men of 20, everything is extraordinarily vague. For Krupp, Muller, Lear, and for me, for all of us whom Cantoric calls the Iron Youth. All the older men are linked up with their previous life. They have wives, children, occupations, and interests. They have a background which is so strong that the war cannot obliterate it. We young men of 20, however, have only our parents, and some perhaps a girl. That is not much, for at our age the influence of parents is at its weakest, and the girls have not yet got a hold over us. Besides us, there was little else. Some enthusiasm, a few hobbies, and our school. Beyond this, our life did not extend, and of this nothing remains. Alaric would say that we stood on the threshold of life, and so it would seem. We had as yet taken no root. The war swept us away. For the others, the older men, it is but an interruption. They are able to think beyond it. We, however, have been gripped by it and do not know what the end may be. We know only that in some strange and melancholy way we have become a wasteland. All the same, we are not often sad. Though Muller would be delighted to have Camrich's boot, he's really quite a sympathetic he's really quite as sympathetic as another who could not bear to think of such a thing for grief. He merely sees things clearly. Were Camrich's Camrish able to make any use of the boots, then Muller would rather go barefoot over barbed wire than scheme how to get hold of them. But as it is, the boots are quite inappropriate to Camrish's circumstances, whereas Muller can make good use of them. Camrish will die. It is immaterial who gets them. Why then should Muller not succeed to them? He has more right than a hospital orderly. When Cambridge is dead, it will be too late. Therefore, Muller is already on the watch. We have lost all sense of other considerations because they are artificial. Only the facts are real and important for us, and good boots are scarce. So just look at the way he writes about a friend of theirs who's dying, and They're thinking of nothing but the boots. And there's that guilt that they're thinking about it, but that's what is reality when you're there out fighting the enemies. So then he goes on to say, so here he tells us how they got through the whole thing. Once it was different. When we went to the district commandant to enlist, we were a class of 20 young men, many of whom proudly shaved for the first time before going to the barracks. We had no definite plans for our future. Our thoughts of a career and occupation were as yet of too unpractical a character to furnish any scheme of life. We were still crammed full of vague ideas which gave to life and to the war also an ideal and almost romantic character. We were trained in the army for 10 weeks, and in this time, more profoundly influenced than by 10 years at school, we learned that a bright button is weightier than four volumes of Schopenhauer, the great philosopher. At first astonished, then embittered, and finally indifferent, we recognize that what matters is not the mind, but the boot brush, not intelligence, but the system, not freedom, but drill. We became soldiers with eagerness and enthusiasm, but they have done everything to knock that out of us. So all the romanticism about the army was just knocked out. After 3 weeks, it was no longer incomprehensible to us that a braided postman should have more authority over us than had formerly our parents, our teachers, and the whole gamut of culture from Plato to God. With our young awakened eyes, we saw that the classical conception of the fatherland held by our teachers resolve itself here into a renunciation of personality, such as one would not ask of the meanest servants, like salutes, spraying to attention, parade marches, presenting arms, right wheel, left wheel, clicking the heels, insults, and a thousand pettifogging details. We had fancied our task would be different, only to find we were to be trained for heroism as though we were circus ponies. But we soon accustomed ourselves to it. We learned, in fact, that some of these things were necessary, but the rest merely show. Soldiers have a fine nose for such distinctions. By threes and fours, our class was scattered over the platoon amongst Frisian fishermen, peasants, and laborers with whom we soon made friends. Krop, Muller, Kemmerich, and I went to number 9 platoon under Corporal Hemestos. He had the reputation of being the strictest disciplinarian in the camp and was proud of it. He was a small, undersized fellow with a foxy waxed mustache who had seen 12 years' service as was in civil life a postman. He had a special dislike for Crop, Jardine, Westes, and me because he sensed a quiet defiance. I have remade his bed 14 times in one morning. Each time he had some fault to find and pulled it to pieces. I have kneaded a pair of prehistoric boots that were as hard as iron for 20 hours, with intervals, of course, until they became as soft as butter, and not even Himmeltoss would find anything more to do to them. Under his orders, I have scrubbed out the corporal's mess with a toothbrush. Crop and I had were given the job of clearing the barrack square of snow with a hand broom and a dustpan, and we would have gone on till we were frozen had not a lieutenant accidentally appeared who sent us off and hauled Hemstos over the coals. But the only result of this was to make Hemstos hate us more. For 6 weeks consecutively, I did guard every Sunday and was hut orderly for the same length of time. With a full pack and rifle, I've had to practice on a wet, soft, newly plowed field, to prepare to advance, and lie down until I was one lump of mud and finally collapsed. 4 hours later, I had to report to Hemostas with my clothes scrubbed clean, my hands chafed and bleeding. Together with Crop, Westus, and Jardin, I have stood at attention in a hard frost without gloves for a quarter of an hour at a stretch, while Hemostas watched for the slightest movement of our bare fingers on the steel barrel of the rifle. I had run 8 times from the top floor of the barracks down to the courtyard in my shirt at 2 o'clock in the morning because my drawers projected 3 inches beyond the edge of the stool on which one had to stack all one's things. Alongside me ran the corporal from Stoss and trod on my bare toes. At bayonet practice, I had constantly to fight with Hemstos. I with a heavy iron weapon, whilst he had a handy wooden one with which he easily struck my arms till they were black and blue. Once, indeed, I became so infuriated that I ran at him blindly and gave him a mighty jab in the stomach and knocked him down. When he reported me to the company commander, laughed at him and told him he ought to keep his eyes open. He understood Hemstos and apparently was not displeased at his discomfiture. I became a past master on the parallel bars and excelled in physical jerks. We have trembled at the mere sound of his voice, but his runaway post horse never got the better of us. One Sunday, as Krupp and I were lugging a latrine bucket on a pole across the barrack yard, Hemstos came by all polished up and spry for going out. He planted himself in front of us and asked how we liked the job. In spite of ourselves, we tripped and emptied the bucket over his legs. He raved, but the limit had been reached. That means clink, he yelled. But Crop had had enough. There'll be an inquiry first, he said, and then we'll unload. Mind how you speak to a non commissioned officer, bawled Himstos. Have you lost your senses? You wait till you're spoken to. What will you do anyway? Show you up, Corporal, said Krupp, his thumbs in line with the seams of his trousers. Mustas saw that he meant it and went off without saying a word. But before he disappeared, he growled, You'll drink this. But that was the end of his authority. He tried it on once more in the ploughed field with us. Prepare to advance, advance, and lie down. We obeyed each order, since an order's an order and has to be obeyed. But we did it so slowly that Hermstos became desperate. Carefully, we went down on our knees, then on our hands, and so on. In the meantime, quite infuriated, he had given another command. But before we had even begun to sweat, he was hoarse. After that, he left us in peace. He did indeed always refer to us as swine, but there was nevertheless a certain respect in his tone. There were many other staff corporals, the majority of whom were more decent, but above all, each of them wanted to keep his good job there as long as possible, and this he could do only by being strict with the recruits. So we were put through every conceivable confinement of parade ground soldiering till we often howled with rage. Many of us became ill through it. Wolf actually died of inflammation of the lungs. But we would have felt ridiculous had we hauled down our colors. We became hard, suspicious, pitiless, vicious, tough. And that was good, for these attributes were just what we lacked. Had we gone into the trenches without the spirit of training, most of us would have certainly have gone mad. Only thus Were we prepared for what awaited us? We did not break down, but adapted ourselves. Our 20 years, which made many another thing so grievous, helped us in this. But by far the most important result was that it awakened in us a strong, practical sense of spirit de corps. That is, what do you call it? Camaraderie. That is brotherhood, which in the field developed into the finest thing that arose out of the war, comradeship. Now this account further that I'm going to read is with his friend who's dying. Uh, we just talked about his shoes, Camrish, Camrish. So it's all about Camrish. This is really, really poignant, um, very hurtful, even as you read. I sit by Camrish's bed. He's sinking steadily around us in great commotion. A hospital train has arrived, and the wounded fit to be moved are being selected. The doctor passes by Cambridge's bed without once looking at him. Next time, Franz, I say, he raises himself on the pillow with his elbows. They have amputated my leg. So that is Franz Kemmerich, his friend. He knows it too, then. I nod in answer. You must be thankful you've come off with that. He's silent. I resume. It might have been both legs, Franz. Wechsler has lost his right arm. That's much worse. Besides, you will be going home. He looks at me. Do you think so? Of course. Do you think so? He repeats. Sure, Franz. Once you've got over the operation. He beckons me to bend down. I stoop over him and he whispers, I don't think so. Don't talk rubbish, Franz. In a couple of days, you'll see for yourself. What is it anyway? An amputated leg? Here they patch up far worse things than that. He lifts one hand. Look here, though, these fingers. That's the result of the operation. Just eat decently and you'll soon be well enough. Well again. Do they look after you properly? He points to a dish that is still half full. I get excited. Franz, you must eat. Eating is the main thing. That looks good too. He turns away. After a pause, he says slowly, I wanted to become a head forester once. So, you may still, I assure him. There are splendid artificial limbs now. You'd hardly know there was anything missing. They are fixed onto the muscles. You can move the fingers and work and even write with an artificial hand. And besides, they will always be making new improvements. For a while, he lies still. Then he says, You can take um, my lace-up boots with you for Muller. I nod and wonder what to say to encourage him. His lips have fallen away. His mouth has become large. His teeth stick out and look as though they were made of chalk. The flesh melts, the forehead bulges more prominently, the cheekbones protrude, the skeleton is working itself through. The eyes are already sunken in. In a couple of hours, it'll be over. That's what he's thinking. He's not the first that I've seen thus, but we grew up together, and that always makes it a bit different. I have copied his essays. At school, he used to wear a brown coat with a belt and shiny sleeves. He was the only one of us two who could do the giant's turn on the horizontal bar. His hair flew in his face like silk when he did it. Cantoric was proud of him, but he couldn't stand cigarettes. His skin was very white. He had something of the girl about him. I glance at my boots. They are big and clumsy. The breeches are tucked into them, and standing up one looks well built and powerful in these great drain pipes. But when we go bathing and strip, suddenly we have slender legs again and slight shoulders. We are no longer soldiers, but little more than boys. No one would believe that we could carry packs. It is a strange moment when we stand naked, then we become civilians and almost feel ourselves to be so. When bathing, Franz Kemmerich looked as slight and frail as a child. There he lies now. But why? The whole world ought to pass by this bed and say, that is Franz Kemmerich, 19 and a half years old. He doesn't want to die. Let him not die. My thoughts become confused. This atmosphere of carbolic and gangrene clogs the lungs. It is a thick gruel, it suffocates. It grows dark. Camarich's face change color. It lifts from the pillow and is so pale that it gleams. The mouth moves slightly. I draw near to him. He whispers, "If you find my watch, send it home." I do not reply. It is no use any more. No one can console him. I am wretched with helplessness. This forehead with its hollow temples, this mouth that now seems all teeth, this sharp nose, and the fat weeping woman at home to whom I must write. If only the letter were sent off already. Hospital orderlies go to and fro with bottles and pails. One of them comes up, casts a glance at Camerish, and goes away again. You can see he's waiting. Apparently, he wants the bed. I bent over Franz and talked to him as though that could save him. Perhaps you will go to the convalescent home at Klosterberg among the villas, Franz. Then you can look out from the window across the fields to the two trees on the horizon. It is the loveliest time of the year now, when the corn ripens. At evening, the fields in the sunlight look like mother of pearl, and the lane of poplars by the Klosterback, where we used to catch sticklebacks. You can build an aquarium again and keep fish in it. And you can go without asking anyone. You can even play the piano if you want to. See, see the pain, he says. You can go out without asking anyone. So here they are like captives of discipline in their different platoons in the army. So away from the civilian life, it is too disciplined a place to be in for these 20 somethings. And they look for freedom. So I lean down over his face, which lies in the shadow. He still breathes lightly. His face is wet. He is crying, "What a fine mess I've made of it with my foolish talk." But Franz, I put my arm round his shoulder and put my face against his. "Will you sleep now?" He does not answer. The tears run down his cheeks. I would like to wipe them away, but my handkerchief is too dirty. An hour passes. I sit tensely and watches every moment in case he may perhaps say something. What if he were to open his mouth and cry out? But he only weeps, his head turned aside. He does not speak of his mother or his brothers and sisters. He says nothing. All that lies behind him. He is entirely alone now with his little life of 19 years and cries because it leaves him. This is the most disturbing and hardest parting that I've ever seen. Although it was pretty bad too with Charan, uh, who called for his mother, a big bear of a fellow who, with wild eyes full of terror, held off the doctor from his bed with a dagger until he collapsed. Suddenly, Camarish groans and begins to gurgle. I jump up, stumble outside, and demand, "Where is the doctor? Where is the doctor?" As I catch sight of the white apron, I seize hold of it. "Come quick! Franz Camarish is dying." He frees himself and asks an orderly standing by, "Which will that be?" He says, "Bed 26, amputated thigh." He sniffs. "How should I know anything about it? I've amputated 5 legs today." He shows me a way, says to the hospital orderly, "You see to it," and hurries off to the operating room. I tremble with rage as I go along with the orderly. The man looks at me and says, "One operation after another since 5 o'clock this morning. Today alone there have been 16 deaths. Yours is the 17th. There will probably be 20 altogether." I become faint all at once. I cannot do any more. I won't revile any more. It is senseless. I could drop down and never rise up again. We are by Camarish's bed. He's dead. The face is still wet from the tears. His eyes are half open and yellow like old horn buttons. The orderly pokes me in the ribs. "Are you taking his things with you?" I nod. He goes out. "We must take him away at once. We want the bed." Outside, they are lying on the floor. I collect Camarish's things and untie his identification disc. The orderly asks about the pay book. I say it is probably in the orderly room and go. Behind me, they are already hauling Franz onto a waterproof sheet. In the following lines, when you read, you find that how does one recover so fast after such a painful scene? So here he writes, the character. "Outside the door, I'm aware of the darkness and the wind as a deliverance. I breathe as deep as I can and feel the breeze in my face warm and soft as never before. Thoughts of girls, of flowery meadows, of white clouds suddenly come into my head. My feet begin to move forward in my boots. I go quicker, I run. Soldiers pass by me. I hear their voices without understanding. The earth is streaming with forces which pour into me through the soles of my feet. The night crackles electrically. The front thunders like a concert of drums." So he can hear the bombs there. So the night crackles electrically, the front thunders like a concert of drums. My limbs move supplely. I feel my joints strong. I breathe the air deeply. The night lives, I live. I feel a hunger greater than comes from the belly alone. Muller stands in front of the hut waiting for me. I give him the boots. We go in and he tries them on. They fit well. Well, that's the reality. He roots among his supplies and offers me a fine piece of saveloy. He offers me a fine piece of saveloy, that is a sausage. With it goes hot tea and rum. So that's that. That's the ISBN number 978 0 449 21394 0. On the back cover, we have is written, "This is the testament of Paul Pommer, who enlists with his classmates in the German army of World War One. These young men become enthusiastic soldiers, but their world of duty, culture, and progress breaks into pieces under the first bombardment in the trenches." So, so it's written, "Through years of vivid horror, Paul holds fast to a single vow to fight against the hatred that meaninglessly pits young men of the same generation but different uniforms against one another. If only he can come out of the war alive." And the New York Times Book Review has this to say: "The world has a great writer about the writer, Erich Maria Remarque. He is the craftsman of unquestionably first rank, a man who can bend language to his will, whether he writes of men or of inanimate nature. His touch is sensitive, firm, and sure. No lessons to be learned from history. Even today, we are living in a war strewn world, all quiet on the Western Front. I hope doesn't become a quiet world and human race is vanquished from the face of earth. Hope not.